Folks, if I could have your attention. Thanks very much again for being here. And I want to introduce our speaker. My introduction will be very short because when you introduce someone whose career was with the CIA, they won't tell you very much. I asked him a lot of questions to buttress this introduction. He said, I won't tell you that. I won't tell you that. So I'm going to tell you what I was able to glean is basically available from public records that he can't keep secret. So from those records that he can't keep secret, he was born in New York City. He was raised in Westport, Connecticut. He attended and graduated from Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. Got a master's degree in government from Georgetown University, got another master's degree in writing from Johns Hopkins. So remember, buy that book. This is written by somebody with a master's degree in writing. He did tell me that his wife's name is Janet. He has one child whose name he would not reveal. He was in the CIA for 33 years as an analyst and later as an executive manager, and was, interestingly, the chief speechwriter for 3 CIA agency directors. He wouldn't tell me which ones. After his retirement, he wrote Hall of Mirrors about Virginia Hall, who is a very interesting character. She is unsung. Until I met him and learned that he had written this book, I didn't even know who Virginia Hall was. I've read a lot about World War II. I had no idea who she was. She is unsung, and I'm so thankful that he is singing her. And he will tell us how that interest developed and how he and Janet got involved in this project. And I'm happy to welcome to our series Craig Gralley. Come on up.
Thank you, Bob. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've been to the Poinsett Club once before, but this is really very well done, and certainly have an august audience here. Growing up, I think there's a word that I used to use a lot, and I'm sure all of you did too, but it's something that we really don't use today very much. And I think that word is hero. Someone who's willing to make sacrifices, a champion of a larger cause other than themselves. Maybe the word isn't used because we really can't decide who the heroes are. But I think that heroes still live among us, and I think certainly we have a number in the audience today. But there are also people who make a lot of quiet sacrifices for family, for community, for country. And on this Veterans Day week, you don't have to look very far. And those of you in the audience who served in the military, thanks very much. Okay. Today I'd like to talk to you about a hero of World War II. Like all great spies, she stayed in the shadows and mostly was unknown outside the corridors of CIA. She was a silent hero. Her name was Virginia Hall. Virginia Hall was really very much an unlikely hero. Against all odds and with a severe disability, she was the Allies' first female spy to live behind the lines in Vichy France, World War II France. There she collected secret intelligence, recruited a network of over 90 clandestine agents, and towards the end of her career led several thousand French Maquis in sabotage operations against the German military. When she was discovered in 1942, she was hunted by Klaus Barbie, who was known as the Gestapo's Butcher of Lyon, and forced to escape over the snow-capped Pyrenees. For 3 days and 50 miles, Virginia Hall dragged her wooden leg over jagged rocks and through waist-deep snow to freedom in Spain. And that's just the first half of the story. But before I get into my presentation, I thought I'd tell you a little bit more about how I came to know about Virginia Hall. Now, Bob gave you a little bit of a clue as to what I did at CIA. I retired after 33 years. People say or think that if you worked for CIA, you must have been some kind of a spy or a clandestine officer. I wasn't a spy. I was a senior manager. My toughest assignment, as Bob mentioned, was being chief speechwriter for 3 directors of the CIA. One of them was Bob Gates, who was eventually became the Secretary of Defense. I love to write. And the great thing about being a writer at CIA is that everybody wants you to tell their story, especially in October when it's budget time. So I had the opportunity to work in all the major directorates. I traveled extensively, including war zones in Iraq and Afghanistan. I retired in 2023 and became a consultant in the CIA history staff, and that's where I came in contact with Virginia Hall's personnel file. At the same time that I was consulting, I went back to school to get my master's in writing at Johns Hopkins. And let me tell you, I was 58 years old at the time, and I was in a class with a lot of 20-somethings. So that was a real kind of eye-opener as to how people think in the younger generations. So I needed a thesis when I was doing my master's degree, and Virginia Hall's file and her life story immediately came to mind. So I decided to write a book, and actually it became part of my thesis, and my professors encouraged me to write a book. They said, we'd never heard of Virginia Hall before. She sounds like a great topic for conversation for the book, and we recommend that you do it. And Hall of Mirrors came out in 2020 timeframe. Okay, so who was this super spy? By all accounts, Virginia Hall had a very happy childhood. Growing up, she led a charmed life, lived in an upper-class family. She grew up on this house that was on a 110-acre farm called Boxhorn outside of Baltimore. She belonged to a family of risk-takers. Her grandfather was an Irishman who was said at age 9 stowed away on a clipper ship bound for Baltimore, and he eventually became chairman of the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. Her father was a real estate entrepreneur and owned a series of movie theaters during the Depression. So independence and risk-taking seemed to be the family trait, and it rubbed off on Virginia. Growing up, she attended the exclusive Roland Park School for Girls. She was a good but not a great student, but one thing she did have was a passion to lead. She was class president, editor of school yearbook, captain of a field hockey team. But what really caught my attention was that Virginia loved to act. She always sought the lead role of the pirate chief. Acting requires you to assume the role of someone else, to hide behind a character, just like a spy does, for the most part. And she excelled at acting, which was, again, a good training for her future career. Her high school yearbook called her the most original of her class. She had a streak of boldness and independence and self-confidence. Virginia was a very unconventional person, unconventional student. One day she brought a live snake wrapped around her wrist to school as a bracelet and terrified her classmates. She was also rebellious. She refused to take a lot of required classes in college. In fact, one of them was gym. And so she dropped out of both Barnard and later at Radcliffe. Virginia Hall's relative, Lorna Catling, who I interviewed extensively for the book, and she was the last surviving relative for Virginia Hall, remembers her Aunt Virginia as nothing really, she was scary. Nothing daunted her whatsoever. She's just a very scary person. So after leaving Radcliffe, Virginia traveled to Europe. She took classes in Grenoble and Paris, and she graduated from the Consular Academy in Vienna, Austria. Languages seemed to come very easily to her. She learned 5: French, German, Russian, Italian, and Spanish. She was also very ambitious, but Virginia's ambition was never to be a spy. In the 1930s, her ambition was to be an ambassador. But in the 1930s, many considered that to be kind of a silly or impossible dream because at the time, the U.S. State Department only had, of their 2,000 Foreign Service officers, only 6 were women, and they didn't have any ambassadors at all. Nonetheless, she was one of those kinds of people that was undaunted. So she studied very heavily for the Foreign Service examination in order to get into the Foreign Service. But in December 1933, disaster struck. Virginia was bird hunting on the Gediz Delta of Turkey, and she climbed a barbed wire fence. She tripped. her gun discharged, and she shot herself in the ankle. Mud from the marsh got into her wound, and gangrene set in. The doctors had to amputate her left leg below the knee and fitted it with a wooden appendage very similar to this. Now, these 1930s prostheses were not like the artificial limbs we have today. They were mostly carved blocks of wood, very crude, had very little articulation, and Virginia's wooden leg and an aluminum foot, even though the leg was hollow, weighed around 10 pounds, and it functioned more like an anchor than as a leg. Her wooden leg was covered with horsehide. It rubbed her stump raw and caused pressure sores. She had straps and a harness that were around her waist and thigh to hold the leg in place. The weight of her leg placed more pressure on her hips and other joints. So she recuperated at Boxhorn for about 1 year, but it was there that she received a very disturbing letter from the State Department. According to State Department rules, amputees could not join the Foreign Service. So Virginia was disqualified from taking the Foreign Service examination. Well, she was furious, and she fought it really hard. She used friends in high places. In fact, the friends included former President Franklin Roosevelt, who wrote Secretary of State Cordell Hull in order to get Virginia instated. But Hull refused, and he wrote a very dismissive note to Virginia that said Hull could become a fine career girl in the consular service. So Virginia was disgusted. She quit the State Department and began to travel Europe. But that was the start of her real education, because it was there that she developed her language skills, learned about European culture. She immersed herself in the politics of the region. But of course, during this time also, during the late 1930s, it was a lot of turmoil in Europe. It was Hitler's rise to power. And when the Nazis invaded France in June of 1940, Virginia was driving an ambulance for the French military. And when Paris fell, Virginia fled Paris, but instead of going home, she went to Ground Zero. She went to London, where the Battle of Britain was taking place. You'll recall that early in World War II, the British had their backs up against the wall, and US diplomats in London believed that London would quickly fall to the Nazis. So in a last-ditch effort, Prime Minister Churchill created a secret intelligence organization called the Special Operations Executive. Its goal was to place spies behind German lines, collect information, and conduct sabotage operations. Churchill told the SOE agents to set Europe ablaze. Churchill was desperate to find people willing to accept dangerous assignments, to live among the enemy, and report back. And Virginia caught the attention of SOE and became a prime recruit. She was an independent risk taker. She was fearless. She knew 5 languages. The languages, I might add, that were both of the Axis and the Allied powers. And she had a knowledge of the politics and customs of the region that really allowed her to blend in very easily in that environment. But what made Virginia especially attractive was that she carried a US passport. In 1940, the US was a neutral in the war, and her US passport allowed her to travel freely throughout France. Virginia was given a cover assignment, and she posed as a reporter for the New York Post. Of course, her real job was espionage. Her cover job gave her access to French and German political and military leaders. It allowed her to ask them probing questions and then report back to her spy masters back in London. Her reports were sent to what we call a cutout, which was the New York Post reporter. She had a cutout in the New York Post who passed the information back to London. Because of her background and talents, Virginia was selected to be the first female agent to live behind the lines in Vichy, France. It required an enormous amount of courage. Before going in, she had very little training. Once inside, she lived with an enemy that regularly executed spies. Virginia had no backup, few supply drops, no equipment. But what she did have was discipline. She kept her ears open and her mouth shut, and she had very good street smarts too. And she had an amazing ability to remain calm under the most stressful situations. Her first mission was in August 1941. It was codenamed Geologist 5. She was told to use her ears and eyes only and to report back. She was not supposed to conduct any kind of sabotage operations at all. She pushed her limits and went far beyond the eyes and ears requirement. And she was supposed to be in place for 3 months. She stayed for 15. Hiding behind fake names and forged documents, Virginia did organize resistance groups, coordinate jailbreaks, plan sabotage operations, and had a network of 90 agents and reported back this intelligence back to the British. She even used her hollow leg to hide and transfer secret documents. Those in the espionage world know that the longer that you stay in place and the more spies that you have under your wing, the more likely it is that you will be discovered. And after 15 months, Virginia was discovered by a Catholic, or betrayed by a Catholic priest who was working for German military intelligence. Her name was given to the Gestapo chief Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, who began hunting Virginia. And he's quoted as saying, "I would give anything to get my hands on that limping bitch." Barbie was cruel and responsible for the deaths of over 25,000 men, women, and children in France. So since her name was given to Barbie, wanted posters sprang up all over France with Virginia's face. They called her the most dangerous Allied agent, and a bounty was placed on her head. Now that she was discovered, she had to leave France, and she wanted to leave by ship through Marseille, but that became impossible because at this time it was November of 1942, and the Allies had just invaded North Africa. The Nazis retreated to the unoccupied zone in France, and with all of these soldiers now in France, the Gestapo had a lot more agents and people to begin rooting out spies. So they began closing borders, and Virginia couldn't get out through Marseille because German patrol boats coming back from North Africa were swarming around the port of Marseille. Her only exit was to climb over the Pyrenees to freedom in Spain. Virginia had only 2 hours' notice. She left Lyon on the 11 p.m. train just in time because the next morning all of her agents began to be rolled up. Klaus Barbie was closing in. Virginia began her trek exactly 81 years ago this week, November 9th, 1942. For 3 days and 50 miles, she dragged her wooden leg over rocky cliffs and through ice and waist-deep snow. On 12 November 1942, Virginia finally made it to Spain, but her ordeal wasn't over. After her 3-day trek, and here she is sweaty and hot and certainly limping badly and exhausted, she made a rookie mistake. Intelligence officers know never to arrive early to an appointment. And she arrived at the train station an hour early. She caught the attention of Spanish border police. She was interrogated and arrested for illegal border crossing and thrown in jail. And it was 6 weeks later that the Americans and the British finally secured her release. Now, at this point, most of us would say, I've had enough. I'm in Spanish jail. The Butcher of Lyon is looking for me. There are wanted posters all over France with my name and picture on it, and there's a bounty on my head. But Virginia demanded to go back. She demanded to go back to France, where Barbie had a target on her back. The British Special Operations Special Operations executive said, no, we're not going to send you back because it'd be a suicide mission. And besides, there's a cardinal rule in espionage that says that agents can never go back to the country that they'd been burned in. History tells us that 1 in 4 British agents were captured, tortured, and killed, and Virginia, again, had a huge target on her back. Still, Virginia was determined to go back. She was supremely confident in her abilities. She quit the British Special Operations Group and applied to a new American spy organization called the Office of Strategic Services, which became the forerunner of CIA. OSS at the time was led by World War I Medal of Honor recipient Wild Bill Donovan. Now, Donovan was in a bind because D-Day was only 2 months away, and the Americans only had 3 agents in France at the time. Here he had Virginia, who had encyclopedic knowledge of the language and the agents in the field, the battlefield conditions, and she knew spy tradecraft. Once inserted, she could be up and running immediately. What's more, Virginia made herself even more desirable as an agent because she learned to operate a wireless radio, which gave her freedom to roam around freely. Now, Donovan agreed to send Virginia back to France. He had little choice. He needed people that were experienced with language skills and knowledge of the battlefield. All of that was in very short supply. So Virginia returned to the Lyon area 3 months before D-Day, helped to organize and equip the French resistance fighters, and then just prior to D-Day, she led several thousand Maquis in blowing up bridges and communications networks and fuel depots. This prevented the German reinforcements from reaching the Normandy beaches during D-Day. And this way, she really helped secure the success of the D-Day invasion. At the end of the war, Virginia received some of the highest awards that the Allies could bestow. She was awarded the MBE, member of the British Empire, the France's Croix de Guerre, and was the only civilian woman to receive America's Distinguished Service Cross. True to form, though, she refused any public ceremony, even one hosted by President Truman, because she said it would blow her cover. And she wanted to go back and serve as a clandestine agent. Now, Virginia got her chance to resume her career in espionage when she joined the CIA in 1951. She was one of the first female clandestine officers in what was then the Operations Directorate, and she planned political, psychological operations against newly installed governments in Europe and South America. She was a trailblazer, but it really wasn't a very happy time for her. The world was changing, the hot war had turned to a cold war, and it required a different kind of skill set. The world was changing, and she was, one of the ways that operations officers get promoted is by being overseas. And Virginia did a few extended TDYs or extended trips overseas, but she really stayed behind a desk in Langley. Here she was. She had more field experience than many directors, and she likely intimidated her colleagues and supervisors. She didn't suffer fools gladly, and her personnel file told how she fought with those who sought to diminish her. Ultimately, CIA leadership really didn't know what to do with Virginia, and she retired in 1966 at the age of 60. In 1957, she married an OSS officer, Paul Goyot, who had parachuted into Lyon near the end of the war. They moved to a 40-acre farm outside of Barnesville, Maryland, where she had a large garden, and they both raised French poodles. Virginia died in 1982 at the age of 76. Now, I thought I'd spend a little bit of time to show you some of the pictures and tell you the story of how my wife and I discovered the trail that Virginia Hall took over the Pyrenees in November of 1942. Our discovery became part of an article that I wrote for CIA Studies in Intelligence. To write a convincing book, and at this time I was also writing the book. In order to write a convincing book about a character, you really have to understand the defining moments of their lives. And for Virginia, it was crossing the Pyrenees. She said it was the hardest thing that she would ever do. So I thought that I needed to understand something about what that hike was like. The only problem was that nobody knew exactly where the trail was. So a few years ago, my wife and I set out to find it. All I had was 2 paragraphs from a book written in French, which is a language I can't read, but fortunately Janet could read it, so she could translate it for me. And that's all we had basically to go on. But we thought that the first stop we would take would be to a Freedom Trail Museum in Saint-Giron. Surely they would hear and know something about Virginia Hall, but when we went there, nobody knew Virginia Hall, nobody knew a trail that went over the Pyrenees in Villefranche-de-Conflent, which was one of the points that we had discovered through this 2 paragraphs of the book. So our only option really was to go to the town where the author said that the trail started. So we did go to Villefranche-de-Conflent. We went to the town's information center. Yeah, where's Virginia Hall's trail? They didn't know anything about that. They didn't even really know about any trails that were in the area. So, but we asked behind the desk. We got a lot of blank stares and shoulder shrugs, but it did pique the interest of one of the women behind the desk. And after some calls and some backroom discussions, 10 minutes later, the woman came back and said, "Yeah, there's one path on the edge of town, but you got to be careful. The trail is really steep." So we set out in order to try to find this trail. Keeping in mind, we were traveling in perhaps the best time of the year, which was May, and both my wife and I were in good health. Now, the trek had all of the obstacles you might expect from a difficult trail. We crossed a lot of bold streams, and not only the streams, we ran into ice and snow, waist deep at the time in November. Whoop. This is part of the trail as well. Now, again, this is May. It still has snow on it. Look how steep that trail is. And at the time that Virginia was doing her trek, it would have been waist deep and there would have been a lot of ice. Now, I'm a former marathon runner. So I started walking this trail, and we both did, and we were huffing and puffing. It was quite a very difficult trail, very, very challenging, high elevation, probably around 11,000 feet. So but we still didn't know at the time whether in fact this was Virginia's trail. So we were a bit discouraged, and we were looking for a trail that went into Spain, and we didn't know whether this one went into Spain or not. We were really discouraged until we finally hit a town called P, and at the center of the town square there was a trail map. We found out that the trail did go to Spain, and that it was the only one from town that Virginia Hall probably started her trek. As we examined the map, we saw that it hit all the landmarks that were identified in the 2 paragraphs of the book, and we knew that we had found the trail. I showed you this picture. Whoop. Okay. There's a trail map. What I'd like to do is show you a little bit about this. Now, I took a picture early on. The cover of the Studies in Intelligence took a picture from France into Spain, and in the background you saw this mountain. Now, we took another trip to Spain. This is Pic de la Donna, looking into France, and I'll show you. It's a video of the trail that Virginia Hall had to take. Okay. There, we're going through the valley. We'll take it through the valley. I'll show you where Virginia Hall has to go back up and over the ridge. And once you hit the top, it goes back down again. Now, once it's a lot deeper on the other side, she had to hike to San Juan de la Besas, which was the train station where she was picked up, right through that valley, right through here. Right now, it's this area tells you how high it is and how much snow they get. It's a ski resort. Anyway, in conclusion, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about this. Is basically the citation that Virginia Hall received for her Distinguished Service Cross. And I'll read it to you. Working in a region infested with enemy troops and constantly hunted by the Gestapo, and with utter disregard for her safety and continually at risk of capture, torture, and death, she directed the resistance forces with extraordinary success in acts of sabotage and guerrilla warfare against enemy troops, installations, and communications. Ms. Hall displayed rare courage, perseverance, and ingenuity. Her efforts contributed materially to the successful operations of the resistance forces in support of the Allied expeditionary forces in the liberation of France. So Virginia Hall received basically all of the awards that could have been given to her. Right now, in fact, a number of senior women in the intelligence community are working on getting Virginia Hall the Congressional Medal of Honor. I was honored enough to be able to do the write-up for that, and right now it's on the desk of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So we're hoping that her Distinguished Service Cross will be upgraded to the Congressional Medal of Honor. Yeah. Well, let's see. I think that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to take any questions that you have. Yes?
Do you know when Virginia was traveling through that incredible journey, was she accompanied by other people?
The question was Virginia accompanied by other people? And the answer is yes. She was accompanied by a Frenchman and an Australian. Virginia Hall's aunt told me, though, that there's a passeur, somebody who helps them take the people across the mountains. The French passeur would have rejected Virginia from the travel if he had known earlier that she had a wooden leg. So yes, but there were two other people who were with Virginia. Yes.
There was a wonderful movie on Netflix called A Call to Spy that talked about Virginia
Right.
and some of the other women that they did recruit.
Right.
And I was just wondering, how accurately was she portrayed in the movie?
Well, I consulted on the movie. It was accurate about Virginia Hall. I didn't think Virginia Hall, the character that they portrayed Virginia Hall to be, was strong enough and earthy enough. And of course, the problem is that they also had other agents who were interacting with Virginia, and they didn't know each other. So there was artistic license involved in order to create the movie. But I think they did Virginia Hall pretty well, although her character wasn't really gritty enough, I think, to, I've been to war zones and I've seen our women in action, and they're smart, tough, and confident. And that was not the character that I saw in the A Call to Spy movie. Yes?
I've already bought your book, so this isn't a trick question.
Okay.
A Woman of No Importance, I believe, was the
Right.
first book.
Right.
Did you find new material, some new information? Because I'm going to read it, but...
That's Sonia Purnell's book, and I worked with Sonia Purnell on her book.
Oh, okay.
A little bit. We interacted back and forth. She asked me a couple of questions about what things meant in documentation, and I gave her a couple of chapters of my book to read, and she made comments on it. Sonia Purnell is an excellent investigative journalist. That's her background, and she's long listed this and short listed that, and that book was very successful. Very successful, but she's an excellent author. And I would say that her book probably is the best biography of Virginia Hall that's out. No, that was Bill Donovan. That was Bill Donovan, and again, it was a very small audience. It was just Bill Donovan, Virginia Hall, and the photographer. That was it. True spy. I mean, old school spy. She didn't. People ask, why didn't we know about Virginia Hall earlier? But the thing about Virginia Hall was that she's an old school spy. She took her security obligations very seriously. She wrote no memoir. She gave no interviews, and she spoke very little about her life overseas, even with her closest friends and relatives. I think you're talking about the Mauzac jail escape, and that incident. They didn't want him to get out, because he was a blabbermouth, and they thought it'd be better for them to keep away from him and not include him in a lot of the escape plans.
Yeah, because he said he would tell.
Yeah.
So how did they?
Well, he stayed in jail. I mean, the story did not tell us what happened to him. It only talked about the people who Virginia Hall got out of jail.
She got them all out.
Yeah, she got. Yeah, she thought that they were going to be 9. Eventually, there were 11 that broke out of the Mauzac jail
Yeah,
in 1941.
all at one time.
Yes.
There was a book called The Nightingale, and a woman facilitated people escaping from Nazi France.
Right.
Was that related to it?
There were a number of people that did that. I think I'm not sure whether Nightingale was a nonfiction book. Was it nonfiction? Okay, it might have been a fictional account. There are a number of accounts of jailbreaks. Virginia Hall was perhaps the best at it, so I wouldn't, and we do have information on her sources and methods of how she exactly did that, so they very well might have used that as an opportunity to write a fictionalized account.
Any other questions? Thank you. Let me take this off of you.
Right.
And I want to thank Craig, and I've asked Craig and Janet to take their places over there by the books, and you are to be in motion now, sir. And Craig did not follow my recommendation. These books were for sale before the talk for $20. Now they're worth $40, now that you know how good the book is, but he has refused to raise the price. He's still going to sell them at $20. So you can do all your Christmas shopping over there, but I want to say, Craig, we have so many heroes who will not sing their own praises. We have so many unsung, unknown heroes. Thank you for writing about this unsung hero and giving us this important information for our country's history. There's so much to be proud of, and this is one part of our history to be proud of. Thank you for coming and hearing it. Hope to see you in December. Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.